Welcome back, Beast Squad. It's been a long time. COVID got beat the shit out though, so let's get in this video. The time that I get energy to make a video again, Bungie ends up nerfing dance machines, and the video was based all around that. It was a sick ass build, but I thought, you know what, instead of just scrapping that entire video and all the time that I wasted, I'll still show the build and I'll just create a how I make Grandmaster builds, some data and testing that I do, and if you need help making your own builds, you can use some of the idea and insight I can just pour right into you and inject into your Guardian veins. But before we do that, I want to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of this video, which is a company called Deving. Deving can save you time and get you the loot. Basically, they're a boost company, so say that you're playing Destiny 2 or the Division 2 and you need the Eagle Bearer exotic auto rifle or anything at all that you might see in one of my build videos. They'll grind it out for you, you pay them a fee, and you can also use code Rustopholis to get 15% off all their services. So save time, save money, it's fast, cheap, and safe boosting. I've used them myself, and they're a trusted company. So if you ever need anything out of any of my videos, give them a holler, and they'll hook you up. Now, getting on to the build, like I said, it's going to be the pre-nerfed version because I just didn't want to waste all that time that I put into researching and building this out and decided to use it and give you some insight on just stuff that I do when I'm testing out builds. But I wanted to mention all of that before we actually start talking about the build because I don't want somebody being like, this build doesn't even work no more or whatever, you know. So the main usage you get out of it now is you get a total of 6 dodges, but if you use marksman dodge or gambler's dodge, the time it takes to dodge and then the time it takes to fire a weapon off and then do another dodge, it all adds up and you get maybe 2 to 3 shots out depending on what weapon you're using, and you get around 2 to 4 melee dodges because of the time that it takes to dodge and then perform the function. So if you plan on choosing Dance Machine, you might as well just choose 6 Coyote because Dance Machine is like a shittier 6 Coyote. But let's jump into this damn armor build that is sadly no good anymore. So when it comes to your helmet, let's start there. So you get 10 energy to play with. When it comes to Grandmaster or high tier content, it's good to have some kind of protection or resistance basically. Used to, you'd want to go with Warmind protection and then put, something like Global Reach on if you were going to use a build that was guaranteed to make a lot of cells. Like my last season build when I used Eye of Another World and Stasis and I use, Warmind's protection, Global Reach, Rage of the Warmind, Wrath of Rasputin, stuff like that. I was making a lot of cells because of Warmind's decree and Telesto. I mean, every 4 to 5 kills, I was making another cell basically. So I had protection around me all the time, which had more of a utility ratio than putting on Protective Light and then wasting 5 energy to use something like Quick Charge, because that's the only other option I have to get Charge of Light without having to go out of my flow of combat. And my other option would have been taking charge, which means I have to physically go out of my way, out of my flow of combat, to go touch an orb just to get Charge of Light to get Protective Light. And since I was making so many cells last season, I could have Fire Team Medic to heal myself, the entire team, had Global Reach for that 24 meters of protection, and then the 50% protection from Warmind's protection, and then Rage of the Warmind to keep making more and more cells and do more damage, so the flow of combat and how things rolled out made more sense to build it that way than it did to go with taking charge or quick charge in Pro Light. And as I've said many times in the past, combat changes season to season, and my job as a player and as a content creator is to figure out the new way of combat and the new way of building this season and every season after this season, because the artifact perks are not always going to be the same basically, and the buffs and the nerfs and all the stuff that changes, it's a constantly evolving game basically is what I'm trying to get at. But I'm just trying to show you how I'm thinking about how I place my energy to make more wise decisions when it comes to building, and that's why Pro Light is on the helmet. But let's move on to the next perk now, which is why I chose the ×1 dynamo instead of going with the assumption that ×2 would be the better option. I, like many others, put on ×2 dynamo the second that I put on Dance Machines, thinking that this was for sure going to be the OP way to go. But then I realized, man, that's 8 energy. And then I just use Protective Light, my other 2 energy. I have nothing for finders, I have nothing to build my stats back up, and you yourself might have decent stats, but is it worth it to waste 8 energy on both of those? Is it really going to give me that much of a difference? And I've always said this when it came to intellect as well. Just because you can get your super back faster doesn't mean that it's always needed. And that was back in past videos where I tested a tier 3 versus a tier 10, showing that you can still get the super back just as fast at a 3 as you could at 10. But of course, by having 2 dynamo, you are going to get it faster. But what's the average difference between a ×1 and a ×2 dynamo, which took the bulk of my research basically. I had to do a ton of runs. I did a lot of strikes where I would drop my light and play Grandmaster level strikes solo and just kind of, time things out that way. I would do a ton of lost sectors. Everywhere in the game, your super times can vary because there's different types of enemies, there's different flows of combat. You'll be making masterwork orbs in certain locations and not in others. Where are the situations where I can actually pull the dodges off and keep those going? So there's a lot of things I had to figure out to see if, ×2 was the better way to go. Is it really going to make a difference in my gameplay, or am I going to get more usage and higher utility value out of having a finder and having more stat potential by saving that 4 energy towards those? This video was already getting longer than I intended, but the difference that I was getting in lost sectors was around a 15-second difference. But there are certain situations, such as the Hollow Lair Nightfall as an example, the difference was around 40 to 30 seconds, but only in some areas. I noticed whenever I had a ×2 dynamo, I would get my super before the ads came out of this location, but if I had a ×1 on, I wouldn't get the super until I was actually fighting the overload, when I could have used the super right when the ads came out to tether them. All locations aren't always going to be like this though, and that's the situations that I have to figure out. What's the percentage of gameplay ×2 dynamo was taking effect, and I found out that around 85% of situations a ×1 dynamo was more than enough and would time out exactly when needed or before I was ever needing it. But there was around 15% locations where the ×2 dynamo did pay off. That's when I realized having more stat potential in that ammo finder played a higher utility ratio that gave me more benefit that noticeably affected my combat, where I actually knew that it was helping me out. Whereas ×2 dynamo was basically me just wasting my energy in majority of gameplay. But that's why I find it, so crucial to study data and do research in the game, especially when you're making builds. I mean, your builds are going to, affect your own skill set as a player and your performance, so when you're in the toughest shit, every choice you made up to that point is going to really matter then. So if it's, lacking ammo, how many times you've been in combat and be like, damn, I need ammo. That finder is going to always be there for you. Or stats, getting that recovery back, or having more fluent mobility, or, getting a different tier discipline so you can, always make sure you get your grenade at that exact moment that you need it. If you're speed killing through areas and doing strategy, all that stuff matters. But let's move on to the next piece. It's going to be the arm piece, and we're going to be talking about elemental charge. Anytime I touch a well of light, I become charged with light. If the well is the same element as my subclass, so if it's void and I'm on a void subclass, I get charged with light ×2. In this situation, we're going to be making solar wells, but if somebody else on the team has a void or whatever they're making, it could charge me with light ×2. But we're not really worried about that. Luckily, there's Unstoppable Fusion Rifle this season, so I am going to be using that, as well as covering overloads using a bow, or this build would handle anti-barriers if it's an anti and Unstoppable Nightfall. It doesn't really matter what affinity your arm piece is. In my case, it's void, but it could be solar, it could be arc. Nothing on here is affinity locked, so technically I could have put elemental charge on my helmet, since it wouldn't have mattered there, and then had a void arm piece and moved protective light to that, because they're both 2 energy. I wanted to make sure that I used a perk that was only 2 energy, because I needed 6 for the Unstoppable Fusion and then 1 for the Overload Bow, and those choices save me 1 more energy to go towards my stats. If I'm good on my stats, I can make other selections such as Transcendent Blessing if I'm doing like a Corrupted or any kind of like Dreaming City activities, which offers 7.85% bonus damage, basically the same as a minor, major, or a boss spec, which also would stack if I had one weapon that had like a minor spec on, or my heavy had like a major on. It would stack with those and grant me around 14-ish% if I wanted to do the extra bonus damage instead of taking the stat potential. The chest piece has 2 options. One of them is 5 energy using quick charge. If it's an arc related Grandmaster, you see that I'm always going to be using 1 elemental and 1 concussive dampener resistance. As I was saying earlier, quick charge is the easiest charge with light perk to get charged with light, basically. So that's going to be the first choice I'm always going to go with. Now, if the burn changes, so if I'm doing a Grandmaster that calls for void resistance or solar resistance, I will go for the second place option, which is taking charge. I'm always going to use 1 element and 1 concussive dampener. Stasis is now included into this as well, and that's probably going to be good for Hollowed Lair, but I can't tell yet because Grandmaster obviously isn't out. Choosing anything but resist in a GM is just going to be causing revives after revives after revives. If you ever study your gameplay, with reserves on, those people that like to choose reserves over resist, the ammo that you start that GM with is going to be gone really quick because you're going to be using a lot of that, and it doesn't drop as much as you think it's going to be dropping because of how much you're often using that ammo. And because of this, it's going to make it as if your reserves never even existed basically. You might start off with more rockets or more fusion rifle at first, but as it's gone, it's not going to get back up. But you are going to be getting your shield busted quite a bit, especially in things like Hollowed Lair and Corrupted this season. And if you don't have those resists there, you're just asking yourself to get one shot or two shot by boomers, instead of doubling the amount of shots by getting that 45% resistance that's also stacking with the 50% from Protective Light. So choosing reserves or anything else over the resist is bad for your team. You're going to be getting your shield busted way more than you're going to get back to that reserve amount you started with, I promise you that. And on top of all that, because of you having resist, you can just play more aggressively and learn how to play at more of a Grandmaster level and not feel like you have to hang back so much. You can get more risky, get inside the combat more, start learning how many shots you actually can take, and kind of how the ads play around. It just lets you stay in combat more to learn more. When it comes to building out the Ad Clear Roll and High Energy Fire, you'll notice I don't build with it that much unless I'm using stacks on stacks, and here's why. Ad Clear Roll is one of the most riskiest rolls you can do on a team, so your survival protection is really important. And you'll notice right here, I don't have stacks on stacks, but I do have High Energy and Protective Light, and as soon as I kill that red bar ad, my charger lights go away, and then I get my shield busted and I have zero protection other than the resist that I have on. And you can't always have resistance for everything that's going to be in a Grandmaster. So unless I'm using stacks on stacks so that I can have one charge of light stack to go to an enemy and that second one to give me protection, that way I can kill an enemy and then get protected by getting hit by another one, or kill two enemies and get charge of light again because of quick charge. But because of all the choices that I had to make, I don't have room for quick charge, high energy fire, stacks on stacks, and pro light, plus the stuff I'm going to have on my class item. It would end up eating all of my energy, all my mod space for my stats, and end up playing worse than the build that I actually made for it, which had more utility value and higher percentage play time, and allowed better flow in combat for survival and run and gun. It's not just about having Radiant Dance Machines on and a couple of perks, it's the subclass perks, Radiant Dance Machines, and every choice that I made on the build that makes the entire build a whole unit. I'll show you the entire build's function and how everything plays out in combat once we go over everything. I just wanted to go over that really fast because some builds are going to have different perks than others, but you can actually just take the same build and put it on 6 Coyote and it still performs about the same. You just get 2 with 6 Coyote. Once we get to the class item, I'll explain on Void subclass how the perks change from top to bottom tree, but now let's move on to the Radiant Dance Machines. Since the build is an unstoppable fusion rifle build, I'm going to be using Explosive Well Maker to go with the elemental charge that I talked about earlier to be making solar wells. And don't forget, wells also charge your abilities. It's about equivalent to an impact induction or a momentum transfer. Once you touch the well, you'll see a slight boost in your abilities. And because of quick charge charging you with light and elemental charge, every time you get a double kill and pick up a well, you're going to get charged with light times 2. And every time you make a well, there's always going to be an orb beside that well because of Telesto and the Catalyst. You're going to have wells and orbs laying all across the map. Whether you're playing base game or Grandmaster, Telesto is the utmost best ad clear weapon in game. So basically you have Protective Light, which is going to protect you when your shield gets busted. You're always going to be making wells and Masterwork Orbs because Telesto is awesome. And you also have the Finder and the Scavenger to give you more ammo. You have Dynamo, which before the nerf, you could do a spam and still get plenty of super energy and have it ready in most situations before it was ever needed, so you're not wasting that energy, you're getting the ammo, you're also got the resist mods on the chest piece, you have quick charge to keep charging you with light, and we haven't even talked about the class item yet, which we're about to get to show you how you can get 15-second grenades over and over again, pre-nerf like I said, but you can put 6 Coyote on. But let's move on to the final piece, the class item, because we're going to be using Well of Life to go with those solar wells. You do see dual bombers there. I'm going to talk about the variation from top and bottom tree in just a second. But having Well of Life means every time you touch a well, your health continuously regenerates for 10 seconds. The gameplay footage you're seeing in the background is just for the sake of the video, but when you take this into a Grandmaster, how it's going to differentiate is you're going to have that invisibility to always go out and grab those recuperation orbs, those elemental charged wells. They're going to heal you for 10 seconds. It's going to be easy to clear ads with Telesto. Always getting those double kills is going to give you Protective Light. Or if you have to change the affinity, you got to use Taking Charge because Quick Charge is tied to arc affinity, but either way, you're always going to be charged with light. And this build is the easiest way to make cells out of all the options in game. It could be dual grenade kills, dual Telesto kills, one grenade kill and then a Telesto kill, or one Telesto kill, one heavy kill, or any kind of combinations. It can even be exploding Screeb or exploding barrels. As long as it's 2 exploding type kills of no matter what type that it came from, it'll still make that well. So if you go back to what I was talking about earlier, is higher percentage of usage combined with the benefit that I'm getting, which is constant health restoration and shielding from protective light, and the perks such as recuperation and the dual bombers, you have to think about the affinities and the perks that come with those affinities and do that balance. So let's say that I use something like Well of Tenacity, which grants a 10% damage resistance for around 5 seconds when I pick up a Void Well. So if I chose that option, I then have to find a perk that's going to create the Void Wells. So that means I have to give up one of my solar armor pieces. It's only 2 energy for Well of Tenacity. So that means I could put it on my arm piece because it doesn't matter what the affinity was for that one. I wasn't using any specific perks that were tied to Solar, Arc, or Void. I was using Elemental Charge, which is 2 energy and is neutral. But what if I'm doing a Solar or an Arc Nightfall? I need the Elemental Resistance to match, so that means I'd have to get rid of my Solar Leg piece or my class item, and I love the Bombers because I can get 15-second grenades with this build on with the top tree, and with bottom tree, I'm using Particle Deconstruction and Healthy Finisher, which has better value than anything that the Void class items are offering me to use the leftover 1 or 2 energy I would have in that situation. And let's say that I use a different perk such as Reaping Wellmaker and put it on my leg piece, then I have to remove Recuperation because it's tied to Solar Affinity, and I'd have to go with something like Better Already, which Better Already isn't terrible, but it's nowhere close to as good as Recuperation and high tier content. Reaping Wellmaker isn't a bad perk, but I'm not going to be getting as many dodges as I am going to be getting double kills or explosive type kills with my heavy. I'm not going to dodge that much. Even if I was making a ton of wells using dance machines, I would much rather get the health recovery instead of like a 10% damage resistance, which is just going to equal 10 resilience in hard content, which is nothing basically. So going back to the higher rate of utility or highest percentage of utility and benefit, it's better for me to have Quick Charge. And I would be trading Explosive Wellmaker and Well of Life, so the balance of that and things I'd be trading off for a perk like Tenacity, for this build specifically, it just doesn't make a lot of sense because of the usage ratio and the benefit that I'm getting out of what I've already got on the build. Reaping Wellmaker and Well of Tenacity are just 2 perks, but I'm just using those as an example to explain the kind of detail you have to go in when you're comparing all kinds of perks and other options that the game gives you. So let's talk more about Well of Tenacity just on a resistance level and talk about what it's actually doing. Tenacity is probably a perk I will probably never use, and the reason is because it's a 10% resilience for around 5 seconds. Yeah, you can extend it and do other things like that, but it's still only 10% resistance. So when you know resilience values, you understand that in Grandmaster gameplay, 2 through 10 resilience functions exactly the same. The only difference is at 5 to 10 resilience, you can tank a red bar sniper shot, and at 10 resilience, you can tank 1 more tick of radiolaria burn damage. Like if you kill a Vex, they have an arc lava pool, you can tank 1 more of those. The radiolaria part doesn't really matter, but I want to break this down on even more levels because most people are just hitting the 5 resilience for the red bar snipers. But let me break this down on a resist mod level of why you still will never need the 5 to 10 resilience and can focus all your stats on the ones that actually matter. I think I'm probably the first or only content creator that talks about resist mods. Before Grandmaster or Master came out, I kept telling people that's probably going to be the next big thing to have to save you on revives and let you play a little more aggro where you could take almost double the amount of shots. And I think that a lot of players still don't understand the concept of how to truly balance your resist. A lot of people will just throw on 2 concussive dampener or 1 sniper resist thinking that sniper resist is only for snipers when it's not. It's anything that's 30 meters or more. And then concussive dampener is anything that does splash damage like boomers, grenades, or anything that can do different levels of damage to you based on how many of the bullets hit you or how much of the splash damages you. Shrapnel cannons, slug launchers, tanks, cabal cannons, minotaur boomers like overloads, tons of things like that. So if you're doing like the Disgraced Grandmaster, you have a ton of boomers. I recommend an arc resist and concussive dampener because you have acolyte grenades, you have falling grenades, you have the boss that does the concussive dampener type damage and the arc damage, you have the night boomers in there. The servitor anti-barriers do concussive type of damage, and when it goes back to needing that 5 resilience, if you do 1 arc resistance and 1 concussive dampener, you no longer need 5 resilience, and you can focus all your stats on mobility, recovery, discipline, strength, intellect, things like that, and it makes 5 resilience completely irrelevant because the only enemies you're not going to be protected against are like the acolytes with their void auto rifles, but they're such an easy kill, they're never putting you at threat. The arc and concussive dampener is also going to cover you for all the cursed thrall that are in there, and the slashing thrall that do arc damage. Another enemy you won't be covered by is the unstoppable ogres, but again, they're an easy takeout, so they're not a threat. Your main threat are going to be coming from all the arc and all the concussive dampener type of enemies. And that's going to range from a 25% resistance if you're using just concussive dampener type damage, such as an acolyte solar grenade, or a void anti-barrier servitor that does void boomer type of damage. There is a diminishing return when it comes to your resist mods. The max is 45%. You get 30% from the elemental resist and then 25% from the concussive dampener types of damage, but if it's 2 of the same kind, such as an arc knight, then you're granted 45% resistance, and it does stack with protective light, so that's 50% plus the 45% resistance, but it's around 85% due to the diminishing return from having so much resistance. So you see why you don't need 5 resilience to worry about the red bar snipers, because you're covered through the entire Grandmaster by stacking and balancing your resists that way, and it's going to protect you from majority of enemies and the max threat enemies, and that's how you balance resist. I want to make sure that I leave you with enough information about resist mod balancing. Here's a tip: whatever the main red bar sniper is usually what the elemental part of the resistance will be, but there are exceptions, such as Proving Grounds. I recommend 2 concussive dampener because of strategy. There are snipers in there, but because of strategy you can take the snipers out really quickly and easily if you know the strats and just how to do it. But if you don't, you can do 1 sniper damage resistance, anything 30 meters, which will also protect you in the tank room from the tank and all the far away enemies, which majority of them are pretty far away outside 30 meters, and then 1 concussive dampener to top that off with it. That's going to give you a total of 40% resistance, but it'll still let you tank the snipers. It can also let you tank the balls that the boss shoots himself if you're outside 30 meters and have the concussive dampener on with that. It'll let you tank the tank's damage if the blast radius of it isn't too close to you, which happens quite a bit. There's also Cabal Brutes in there that shoot their, Cabal Cannon type damage that can protect you from it, and you're pretty far away from most of the enemies in Proving Grounds, and you can set yourself up that way. But there are going to be snipers in there, but anything counts for 30 meters in sniper damage resistance. Another one that I might get asked about is Glassway, because it has, arc snipers all the way to the boss. You get to the boss, there's solar snipers, and this Grandmaster also fooled me until I did plenty of runs on it to finally understand what the resist balancing was, and it is actually arc damage resistance, which is going to cover you with the red bar snipers and let you tank their shots, and 1 concussive dampener. And I learned that because every time I would put 2 void resist on, or 1 void and 1 concussive dampener, or 1 solar and 1 concussive dampener for the snipers at the boss and trying to take out the anti-barriers, I realized that once the boss wants you dead, or if the wyverns come in with their void damage and splash damage that concussive and void should protect you against, they're going to immediately kill you. So it doesn't matter if you have that resistance on. 1 concussive dampener is enough, but that arc resistance is going to protect you from the Hydra, from the floor if you accidentally fall into it, and the Vex that do shoot red bars at the boss are easily taken out right at the get-go, so they're not really a major threat at all. But 1 arc and 1 concussive dampener is perfect for Glassway. And going back to strategy, when it comes to the snipers that shoot solar damage, you can actually head glitch them in specific locations at the Glassway boss. So again, why you don't need the 5 resilience for red bar snipers. I didn't expect this to be such a long video, but I wanted to make you walk away with all the build knowledge you'll need for at least a long time from now, and you can still get some help along the way with some other future builds I'm going to be talking about later in the season. But if you want to stand up, take a little stretch. I appreciate you sticking this long with me, Guardian. It means you care to become Beast and be a Grandmaster builder. Earlier we talked about the Dance Machine build with the Dual Bomber. Now I'm going to jump into stats and why they matter and how you can dial your tiers in to fit a specific build type. Here's the type of stats that I recommend for a run and gun hunter build: 8 mobility, which is also 10 with a lightweight weapon, 2 resilience, 8 recovery, 8 discipline, 3 intellect, And then 5, or whatever you want for your strength. I highly recommend Gambler's Dodge for a lot of different reasons, especially on Stasis and Solar this season that disrupts champions with melee hits. You can keep doing the dodge by the champion and keep hitting them. Or if you're using mid-tree Solar with the knives, every time you throw your knives and hit a target, it recharges your dodge ability. And if you were to put 6 Coyote on, you can stun and overload with your knives and do a bunch of dodges around them to keep getting your dodge back, and recharge your super with Dynamo, or recharge your grenade with Bomber. There's 2 different types of tier dialing. One is for a build's function, such as Dance Machines, the pre-nerfed version, when you're trying to close gaps and get your grenades back over and over to be spamming. And the other type of dialing is speed kill dialing, which means when you travel to each encounter, you always have your abilities ready to perform a said strategy. Let me show you an example of speed kill tier dialing in case you've never been familiar with it or just now heard about it. This way you can understand the level of detail that some builds have to be at. So I'm at a tier 9 discipline. I just threw my Bleak Watcher grenade out, and it's crucial that I get it back for the encounter right after this encounter. You see I threw the rocket out. That's going to make my Masterwork Orb to contribute to my tier 5 intellect and my super, because it's also crucial that I have my super at the next encounter. And this area goes by really quick because the strategy that I created is a speed kill strategy that's the most aggro and fastest way to carve through this area. So pay attention to all the Masterwork Orbs I'm creating, and how that impact induction ensures my grenade for this area here, and that clutch ass protection from Chapo that sets both of us up to perform this next strategy that I created. And it's also going to top my super off that tier 5 intellect right on time, as I'm knocking 2 birds out with 1 stone by charging my super and clearing all the ads up top. And I have the arc resistance and the concussive dampener to protect me from all those grenades going off. Chapo is actually at a tier 9 playing support role in boss DPS, and I actually get my super before he does. And that goes back to ad clear roles will always get their super back faster, so going on a tier 3 with the light subclass to up to a tier 5 on a stasis subclass is really all that's needed. 4 and 3 timeout normally the same, but I had to get a tier 5 just to ensure that I always have my super in this encounter here, and it plays like clockwork every single time we do Glassway Grandmaster, doing these same strategies over and over again. Sometimes we don't even pop our supers here, but it's there to add consistency in case anything hits the fan. We always have our supers ready. And he also uses Phoenix Protocol, and again, because of my tier 5 intellect, I'm going to pop my super on the second wave of ads, and that's what tier dialing is all about, where everything's ready at the exact moment you need it based on timestamps you're doing throughout your speed kill runs in a Grandmaster. But if there's any kinks in my build, all this shit just falls apart, so it's crucial that you study the data and understand and be aware of your combat, the situations you're in, and forming these type of strategies that builds like this allow, such as the mobility on encounter 3, where I'm throwing the grenade, then throwing the rocket, and then reloading while jumping to that high rock, and then switching to a Telesto to then jump over to the platform. If you're at a 6 and lower, you'll get hung up on that jump and have to mantle because you can't perform all those actions and being in the air. It won't allow you to do it, but if you never use it, you never master it, it will never reveal what it will allow you to learn. There's tons of unforeseen skill sets that come along with mobility that the insight is really hard to translate for somebody else to understand because they actually have to learn it themselves to really get it. If I never used mobility, that strategy on encounter 3, I would never know it existed. And that's because limitations that builds can put on people, it'll plateau your skill set, and you'll have yourself thinking that you figured out a way to play without mobility and you just don't need it. But it's one of those situations where you just don't know what you don't know, because just that one strategy that I showed you out of hundreds that I've created, you would have never known that existed until I just showed it to you. I 100% would never use mobility if I didn't know that it was one of the keys to let me play at the max ability this game offers, and it definitely is if you're a console player. But even in combat on PC, of course you can do the wheel scroll and stuff like that and go fast and forward motions, but your combat side to side and when you're actually fighting ads, you still need the height, you still need other aspects that I'm going to talk about later. But now let's go back to the other style of calibration or dialing, and that is when you're dialing for an exotic's function. Before the nerf, I wanted to get Top Tree Void to play just like Bottom Tree Void with its recharge rates because I like the tether on Top Tree Void better than I like the tether on Bottom Tree. Also, the invisibility on Top Tree makes you go completely invisible to everything, including action darts, shriekers, any kind of tracking bullets and stuff like that, whereas Bottom Tree, things can still track you and enemies don't cease to see you immediately. It takes about a second, but notice the recharge rate gap. Now let's go to tier 6 with a ×2 bomber using the dodges again. After the 6 dodge, notice the invisibility and when it ends and where the recharge rate of it is. You see that gap that's still there even after I become back? I wanted to fix that completely so that I could still throw another grenade before any enemy could see me. Now let's do that same test again, but bump it up to a tier 7, and notice the gap again whenever the invisibility ends. Even at a tier 7, there's not very much of a gap, if any, if you can notice here, but I did see situations outside of the test that I made for the video where tier 7 would have even more of a gap than you see here. So if you wanted to completely close it off, tier 8 does that. And don't forget, 2 or more kills with explosive well maker is going to create a well, and that also contributes to the recharge rate and gives me health regeneration because of Well of Life and protective light because of elemental charge. You can't have everything when it comes to stats, so the stats I was recommending earlier being the tier 8 mobility, tier 8 recovery, tier 8 discipline, tier 3 intellect, and then whatever you can afford for strength because of gambler's dodge. Tier 8 mobility isn't an overkill and lets you easily afford other stats because of how stat balance is in the game. But you can see with the lightweight bow that I actually got an 11-second dodge. It's actually 12, but when you have a lightweight weapon on, it grants you 2 tiers, so I'm actually at tier 10 mobility, recharge rate, and movement. This is my favorite bow to use, unrelenting, hipfire grip, 540 charge rate because of the draw time masterwork. It gives me 576 accuracy, but at a 540 draw. If you didn't know about bow damage, the lower the draw speed, the more inaccurate they are, and then the higher it is, the more accuracy you get. That's pretty much how it works, but they all do the same damage. But having a 540 draw speed bow, especially with unrelenting, is really nasty against overload champions because you can get more control out of them, and when you have a bunch of cloning taken, it's way easier to control them so they can't keep multiplying themselves. Getting that faster draw just lets you control situations better, and when you have the accuracy of a 576 but drawing at a 540, you'll find more clutch activity out of a 540 than you will out of like a 612 or higher. And also, if you're using Archer's Tempo with a 540 draw speed, you actually don't go faster than a 540 draw speed, so you actually won't get any benefit out of Archer's Tempo if you're at a 540. Here's one of the many benefits you can get out of a 540 draw and triple jump. So right here, so that you have a ledge where an overload's above it, you can keep jumping up and doing 1 jump at a time and having that hang time and a fast enough draw to get 2 arrows out in 1 jump. Top 3 perks I would think would be Unrelenting, Vorpal, Sympathetic Arsenal, but the 540 draw speed and the hipfire grip buff really does pay off. You could even go with Demolitionist as well, but I think with the build and how it's set up, you're not going to get as much benefit, I don't think, out of it than you would with Unrelenting or Sympathetic Arsenal. But now let's move on to the next stat, which is going to be the mobility stat. I'm not going to go over recovery and the other stats. Of course, mobility, recovery, and discipline, they're just a golden rule that I'll never break. It's always going to be a 7 and higher, and then trying to hit the tier 3 to tier 5 intellect, depending on if I'm on stasis or a light subclass. And melee recharges will vary as well. If I'm on my Warlock using stasis with a ranged melee, I'll build more for melee than as if I was on, like, you know, Void, where it's just a short range melee, which I'm not going to do that much in Grandmaster gameplay. And if I was, it would be a situation like, you know, Void Unstoppable Melee mixed with Eye of Another World. That way, if a teammate goes down or anything, I still have my weapon to handle a champion and that melee. But I am going to go over the mobility stat, just to kind of give you some insight. I'm also going to teach you the sea walk, how you can perform that in combat and why it's really clutch. Unfortunately, you can't do the sea walk with the hunter. The way they turn and jump and the angles that they go at just doesn't make it as effective as the Warlock and the Titan. But let's hop into it and learn about the power of mobility. Mobility is a hard topic, but let's start it off with the fastest console jumps for forward momentum or movement. That's going to be strafe lift, burst glide, and then strafe jump, unless triple jump is 4 mobilities higher than a strafe jump player. Oh, that's not a heavy weapon. Is he really like coming back to health, dude? Get the fuck out of here.
How are you not dead? How do I get sniped every time,
right?
But you're literally like in the forefront, bro?
Spent a lot of time on snipers too.
Like literally we're shooting at you for like 10 hours, bro.
I didn't want to post that to boast or flex or be like, look at me, you know, doing whatever. I wanted to show it because these types of comments are what I get majority of the time on almost every random team that I get on. It's always, this GM is so much easier, or how the fuck are you playing at this location or playing that aggressive? And if they only knew that the combination of the build and mobility and recovery and the stats that I have set up are one of the main reasons that I can do this, they would use it all the time. But I know that people don't really use mobility, and my theory behind that is just mass player-based misinformation. The same way it was all those years that I made Resilience Sucks for PvE videos until finally people really understood it sucked. They'll see one of their favorite creators not using mobility and just go on the assumption that it sucks, And again, this isn't to like, you know, flex or whatever. Mobility is hard to talk about, and I'm going to say some things that are probably going to sound like showboaty or whatever. Nobody is playing Grandmaster as aggressive as I am. I'm not trying to sound like a dickhead or anything, but in all seriousness, nobody's playing Grandmasters on the level of aggressiveness that I'm doing it. They're either using cheese mechanics or boss cheeses or game manipulations or something like that, or distance in their favor to where ads can't really hit them. They can sit back with a bow the entire time. And since you can't really find a lot of people that play GMs that aggressively, nobody really understands the benefit it's giving you. And that's what I wanted to break down in this segment of the video, because the entire purpose of my channel is me teaching others how to do this kind of stuff. So let's get into it, and I'll explain the best way that I can why mobility is one of the best stats when you're at 7 up. So pay attention to the 2 mobility and the ground covered per movement that I'm doing. When it comes to me going 7 up mobility, that's when you really feel the game changing and the speed improving. 6 and 5 feel the same, 3 and 4 feel the same, and 1 and 2 feel the same, and then 8 and 9 feels the same, and then 10, just really you can feel like you're running without having to hit the run button pretty much. These are just base game ads, so imagine it's, you know, Grandmaster tier ads. They shoot a lot faster, move a lot quicker. Your lower mobility values can hardly even dodge these type enemies, but let's go to something like an Overload Champion at Master level, which moves the same as a Grandmaster level, just without as much damage, and your light matters. When it comes to dodging an overload up close, there's a specific joystick movement that you have to make on console. It's like an S shape and then a dodge to the right or left. But when you have lower mobility values, the controller doesn't react or start moving quick enough. You can do the joystick movement, but it doesn't register it to start moving it at that much speed like a 7-up mobility will. The reason why I always choose 7 mobility instead of like 8, 9, or 10 is because the stat balance in 7 mobility or 8 mobility is still good enough to dodge some of the hardest enemies in game, including these overload champions. But now let's go to 7 mobility, and I'll do the same joystick movement that I've learned and taught myself to do to dodge these enemies, and you can see that it has enough ground coverage per movement and the reaction time is much quicker. This goes back to that side-by-side 7 versus 4 that I showed you at the beginning, where it shows the ground coverage. It might not look like that much distance to some people, but when it's micro movements or just anything at all, and you know, bullets are flying that fast at you at such a close range, every foot that you gain that much quicker is going to immensely pay off. But then you go to a 3 or a 4 mobility, you can see the left to right movements. It seems like when I go right and then jerk the joystick left, it's like a momentous pause or something where it has to catch up and then start going the direction you want to go. I'm not saying you'll never dodge any ad at 3 or 4 mobility, but most likely there's going to have to be way more distance between you and the enemy that's shooting at you. Now let's say that you're trying to just go behind cover. Say that you poked out, you threw a couple shots out. You see how fast my reaction time is to get behind cover quickly? But as I'm trying to get there with 3 mobility, Bungie's design in this game is based on subtleties. So when you go to something like 3 mobility and you do it side by side for 7, someone who's spent thousands of hours learning high mobility is going to be playing out longer. They're going to be playing much closer, and then when they go to low mobility, they realize that that ground coverage per movement no longer exists, and they get fucked a lot. And that slight subtlety of just that much more distance really shows its importance when it's taken and ripped away from you and you don't have it anymore. You may not realize this, but being shot slows you. Here's just an example on some patrol ads, 7 mobility, walking through these kind of guys, which you're going to see quite a bit in the Grandmasters this season. But this ad can completely immobilize somebody on patrol at 2 mobility. So imagine how much more of a difference it's going to be in Grandmaster gameplay if you're an ad clear person on your team. Even this ogre will slow you down, but a GM ogre is going to slow you down way more than this. I'm going to show you a brief example of this. I took this clip from the mobility part 2 video that I crammed all into this one. I wanted to demonstrate how the distance gain can alter outcomes. So all I'm doing basically is walking and constantly shooting and reloading this SMG. I'm doing one completely turnaround style shot, but the rest are going to be completely walking forward. This boss will shoot his slow rockets at the same time when you enter here. Watch how much more ground I do on 7 mobility, and I actually walk past them before all of them can hit me. But you can see the 3 mobility player didn't make it enough time and got hit with more of those rockets because of the less ground covered. This happens everywhere in battle basically. Here's another example of 7 mobility, wielding a heavy weapon which slows you down more in strafing, and I'm reloading, and I was still able to do my field prep reload and hop on top of that ledge while getting hit with slow rockets. I'm not saying that you can never play low mobility and play aggressiveness. All I'm saying is you're on a very small ticking time bomb that's going to go off way sooner than as if you were on higher mobility and playing aggressiveness. Little situations such as this with the boss at the Glassway Grandmaster, he can melt you extremely quick. I talked about the arc and concussive dampener earlier, or even right here, same thing, arc, concussive dampener, and mobility all going and synergizing together to get out of there just in time, where I would have definitely wasted a revive had that not been there. Here's encounter number 4 in Glassway again. You saw this strategy earlier, but I'm breaking it down now. How I turn around, strafe, don't get sniped, and get behind cover just in time to save Chapo from getting sniped on his jump up. Most people don't understand the thing about the height and mobility and how it really helps you out in situations like this by making you jump higher faster. Here's 4 mobility, just going uphill and jumping over this object. You see how I got hung up right here? It's not about the complete max height of your mobility, it's about just jumping in general. It's going to get higher faster. Both of them can make this jump, but it's more cleaner on 7 because it jumps and gets off the ground much higher. But here's the situation again. Of course, 4 mobility can make this jump, but if it doesn't time it right, it's not going to get higher off the ground and has to jump much sooner. Here's that same jump, but it's 7 mobility and on a much steeper side and jumping way too soon. And you can see that I still make it, even though I do clip, I'm making that jump way higher than 4 had to do it. Here's 3 mobility mantling here, then swap back to 4 mobility. You can see it clips it and still makes the jump. But then if I go to 7 mobility, this is where I start getting height options, where I can either make it smoothly like this, or I can turn around and just completely jump on top of it, or I can do what you may have seen in a past video called the Warlock super jump. You can boost into an object and go even higher off the ground. So I have all kinds of height options at my disposal if I need them. Now say that you're on the run somewhere. I'm not saying that you're ever going to be on the run in this specific location in the game. I'm really just trying to re-educate the player base to get off that surface layer mindset of, walk faster, jump higher. That's pretty much all it does. Why do I need it? Understanding mobility goes far beyond somebody saying it makes your combat smoother, which it definitely does. I literally owe everything that taught me how to play aggro to mobility, because it lets me play closer than as if I had low mobility. Situations like this are escapable. Getting the shot off and jumping and getting higher off the ground that much quicker definitely has its payoffs. Now let's jump into jump height, combat flow, and strategies. I'm going to use these telephone poles as an example, then give you some brief demos of similar situations that are like this. So jump down, get the shot, jump back up. There's not too many situations in game that low mobility won't reach, but there's definitely still situations that'll have limitations where it's going to require you to jump on another object to reach a higher object, basically. Here's a brief combat situation of just the flow that you get, and now that you know you jump higher faster, you're going to be getting off the ground and up there much quicker than low mobility. Some of you may have seen these situations a while back when I posted I feel bad for low mobility players video, but here's that situation again. I'm going to show tons of other situations. I would have never have survived that and got the shot off while I was falling off the mountain to still mantle that at the very end to save myself. That's the kind of shit mobility gives you a lot of the time, is those second chances. But again, if you're not playing this aggressively, you're never going to understand the need for it. If you're hanging back or, even little jumps like this, I should never have a problem reaching the top of this. You know what I mean? That should never even be an issue, but it does happen. That's just one more limitation that I'll have in my arsenal. Pay attention to all the air actions that I'm getting before I actually land. So I threw the rocket off, I reloaded it, shot another rocket. On my fall down, I swapped to Telesto, get the shot off. Shit hits the fan right here. If I wouldn't have covered that much more ground or hit that arc pool without being that much higher off the ground, I would have definitely died right there. And then that clean spin away shot at the very end. Now here's another situation I notice a lot, and that's walls being in my damn way with low mobility. I'm so used to making rocket shots like this that I completely forgot these were a bitch on low mobility, or not as seamless. Even just shooting and charging a fusion rifle while jumping over a wall, low mobility completely takes that tactic away from you. It doesn't exist anymore, and you can see the more times that I try, the more shots that I end up missing, and then I get shot by other ads. But 5 seconds ago, in higher mobility, I would have just killed the ad and then turned around and shot the ads that shot me first. So you can see how these limitations hold you back and waste more time, making you take more damage by shit just not happening. This is another reason that I claim so many kills and strikes versus other people, is because I'm not limited in any of this. I can get these shots off no matter where I'm at on the map. I can jump up and charge a fusion, but you see how I took more damage there when I could have just shot it way earlier. Now here I am on 7 mobility, getting just surprise attacked by these acolytes spawning behind me, and I can easily jump up and just stab kill that fusion shot. Here's something low mobility players don't even know exists because they don't have it. Here's low mobility, jumping over, and not having that faster height and height in general makes me take tons more damage by jumping over things like bosses or Cursed Thrall, where if I drop my tier one more tier from 5 to 4, I'll die from it. Here's a similar situation where I'm pretty much almost dead, but that higher mobility, getting off the ground faster and higher, the Cursed Thrall blows up and I don't even take damage from it. I would have for sure died there with low mobility because they have more health and do more damage in the Disgraced Grand Master, and I didn't even take damage off of that one. And the reason why I'm not taking damage off of them is because I've been playing on high mobility for so long that distance to enemies normally isn't a limitation for me. And that's one of the things you have to play aggro in this game, is distance can't be an issue because you're normally right in the enemy's face playing aggro or doing strategies. So I forget that when I drop to low mobility, and I also understand why somebody at low mobility never learns to play as aggressive as me, is because they're limited and can't get this close to ads and play this aggressive and survive through it. And if you never encounter these styles of situations, these close calls, you know, playing run and gun like this, you're going to peak in skill set and not learn how to survive those situations because it doesn't let you experience them enough to learn from them. The game's literally saying, hey man, hold up, back up a little bit. You're a little too close, bro. You need to get some higher mobility, such as this stupid ass shot right here. I do this shot every time I jump across, but as soon as I turn sideways and start firing my weapon, it registers my mobility strafe speed, and I clip that wall and fall down. Look at how many actions I get right here. I throw the grenade, shoot the rocket, swap, get the telesto, and then land right in time to then pop the anti-barrier shield. And then situations like this. I'll show you the remainder of this strat. Chopo jumps down, takes care of all the champions down there, and then part of my job is speed clear, so that's what I'm going to go do. All the ads are up top, there's just champs down there, and that's his role. So I fire the rocket, pop his shield, this wall in my way, I seamlessly jump and throw the melee, still hit it. Same with the rockets. My short jumps of my high mobility are way higher than my short jumps on my low mobility. So I can just, you know, tap, tap, jump up, throw the rocket across, it ain't shit, you know what I mean? Same as Glassway in Counter 3. Throw the grenade, throw the rocket, swap telesto, hop across seamlessly, pop super if I need to. Would have never known it existed on low mobility. Same with the Disgrace. The walk speed is really crucial here, and the height speed right here. So I pop the Knight, the walk speed while shooting Xenophage has to be there. Right here, turn and have more mobility to just turn and keep hopping around, making those cells, making sure that I'm boosting forward faster, which mobility affects on Warlocks. Right here, I'm going to jump over all these Needler type shots, or these, you know, tracer rounds. And because of the height and the speed, a lot of them don't clip me as much. I get hit by a few, but my height being that much higher makes me not take as much damage. That's the most aggro way to do the beginning of the Disgraced. Here's a situation where I fall down in Radiolaria, but again, because the jump height being faster and just higher in general, I just seamlessly hop right back up and get back to slaying. Now let me break this down into the last category, and that's going to be air strafes. Forwards, backwards, sideways, but here we are at 3 mobility. I'm going to pause it, then I'm going to take it off and let you just see the difference and then show you that in combat. As I keep saying, it's all about the ground covered and how fast you do it, and that's really what pays off more than anything and is really crucial to the C-Walk. Now here we are on 7 mobility, and it just launches off much quicker. There's none of that, like, you know, paused feel in the air when you first start doing it to start building momentum. Going back to PC, I know going forward faster because the wheel scroll is cool, but you should still be dealing with stuff like this, and that sideways momentum is what gets you the hell out of the way when shit is hitting the fan. Here's another example of this on the Warden strat. So hop up, perform all those actions, rocket twice, fall down with the telesto shot, and then right at the end, I'm going to go up to this overload and be able to strafe that much quicker around him to just demo the importance of ground gained per movement. I even hit him with the melee, and I can back up so quick, and my recovery all go hand in hand. And that's what all my builds are designed to do. I don't give a shit about patrol builds or, you know, little cool strike builds or little nifty, you know, whatever shitty builds that people make all the time. I just don't care about that kind of stuff. I want to survive the most aggro, run and gun, beast-ass shit in this game and pull the most amazing strategies off. Watch this at the very end of this whole strategy, the hang time and the turnaround shot to still have that much more accuracy while in the air and turning around. It unlocks these types of shots in the game. I know I'm showing a lot of footage with mobility, but it's a hard topic to convince people that it actually is game-changing and just game-breaking when it comes to your skill set in comparison to low mobility. Here's the comparison of your jump-away dodge speeds whenever your shield breaks and you gotta get behind cover or just get away to recover. I always thought it was interesting when you very first start playing Destiny that all the startup level gear has no mobility on it, like seriously 0. And my theory is Bungie wants you to learn the game by playing it at a slower pace. And then as you get leveled up and better at the game, you can add more speed to it, and that enhances your gameplay and lets you unlock more abilities and just maneuvers, such as right here, the encounter 1 for Glassway. Charge my grenade, throw the grenade, swap to the rocket as I'm falling, and that strafe speed sideways lets me get to the side of that cliff just that much quicker, allows strategies to let me control ads before they could even get into their spawn locations, reloading slow heavy weapons such as Xenophage, and strafing sideways in the air to dodge shots and GMs. These are the kind of tactics it unlocks. During Insight Terminus, I use 1 solar, 1 concussive dampener, and that 1 solar combined with mobility is the reason that I survive stuff like this. I'm used to playing closer to Unstoppables because I can always get away that much quicker because of higher mobility, but at 4, I can no longer play that close because my getaway time is increased and I can't have it increased. So again, it forces me to play backwards more. I talked about being on a ticking time bomb earlier. I survived the first slash. The second one, I can't get away from that one quicker because the ground covered makes me land in a spot where the second slasher will hit me. I'm gonna go over the last situation versus Marauders and just show you the only time I get hit is when I get backed against the wall. But of course, in Glassway, I use 1 arc and 1 concussive dampener. The only thing protecting me here, though, is the arc resistance. So without that resistance, it's a one and done pretty much. But watch all the close encounters, and again, going back to the height and the ground covered lets me get away. What mobility is doing against them is giving you more time to react when they're closer towards you. If they sneak up on you at low mobility, they're just going to insta-kill you. Here's a difference in 4 mobility, and then I'll kind of side by side switching back and forth, going from one slice to the next slice basically. You can see as I keep backing up, I keep gaining more ground away from them, whereas 4 is going to require a jump away much sooner. This is the type of situation where somebody will die from a Marauder. So I thought that I killed both of them just then, but right at the last second, the dude just comes up out of nowhere. But higher mobility is always going to give you more time to react to situations that you really don't have any time to react for.
Dodge this motherfucker. Yeah.
The sea walk. This is what many probably came to just to get out of the whole video pretty much. So sorry for making you wait so damn long. The requirements for this are high mobility and high recovery, Warlock burst glide, and Titan strafe jump. It can't be done on catapult. They just don't get enough ground coverage. I'll kind of demonstrate it to give you an example. But number 1 is upon the shield break, you need to turn and get a quick boost of forward momentum. Is right here. You'll see my shield bust. I turn, jump forward, and then the second step is immediately look at the ads that are shooting you and start cutting in shapes of a C, but make sure they're sharp pivots. Don't try to go in like, you know, a complete like arch. Make them complete cuts. Sometimes you might even need to turn backwards and look completely behind you, but as you do that, you always need to make sure you turn back and face the enemy, because for some reason, the AI react and just start missing you whenever you look at them. I can't explain it. It's been like this since Destiny 1 when I first figured it out, so I don't know anything else beyond that, basically. But this is designed to let you recover or get behind cover or just, you know, save your life in tough situations like this. Here's the example of me jumping completely backwards. You see how I keep looking back at them and then turning completely back and then jumping again? That's kind of how you have to do it on the Titan, but I'll explain catapult how it doesn't really work. See how when I boost, it just kind of goes too much up instead of gaining more strafe coverage? That's what you don't want to happen. You don't want to go straight up. You want to go, you know, kind of diagonally. But when it comes to the strafe jump on the Titan, you know how I said you can't really go in like an arch C? You have to kind of like look behind you to cut more, if that makes sense. How you can kind of see me cut on this last jump. That's how you have to cut it on the Titan. So make sure you always look back at them, but a lot of your jumps are going to be just looking completely behind you the whole time. That way you gain more momentum. Here's a few demonstrations in combat what it kind of looks like. I just went to the, you know, Vault of Glass to find some ads to stage it pretty much. But I never know when a C-Walk situation is going to happen and never think to record it whenever it does happen. But it's real easy to do. It's kind of just like remembering to do it. If you didn't know about, you know, turning your whole body away from the ads, you know, and jumping backwards sometimes, those situations and knowing when to do those are usually in like the oh more shit situations, you know what I mean? So when you know you're almost dead, try to look completely behind you, but make sure that you always look and face the enemies that are shooting you, and the game will normally let you survive it because of that situation. It's not always a guarantee that you're not going to get killed in it, but it gives you a second chance and it just buys you more time, and that combined with recovery is what allows you to survive it more than anything pretty much. But when you're in the shit and doing the hardest activities in the game and you want to play the most aggressively and do some cool strategies that you can actually formulate and, you know, put all your stats and stuff together to make the strat happen, that's what you get out of everything that I showed you today and how to build and become a Grandmaster builder. Anyways, Guardians, hopefully that injected enough knowledge and data to inspire you to go build. And honestly, nowadays, that's just how I get my kicks when I play Destiny. I like to inform myself and just make myself a better player in a game that I'm highly passionate about, as I know that millions of other players are as well. And that's my contribution to the community, is to help out those that would rather go play and not spend all their time testing and, you know, figuring all this stuff out. They can just come here, the one-stop shop for your build knowledge. Again, Guardian, hit the subscribe button, join the Discord, talk to me daily. There's new members joining all the time, and there's a ton of channels about the Destiny universe, weekly reset information, check your stats, ask me questions personally. Anything you need is all there for you, Guardian, so come and hang out. And of course, I would save the best for last. Shout out to B Squad. When I first started creating content, I just never thought that I would ever have any supporters or anybody on that kind of level that would be willing to actually, you know, see the journey and, you know, help me fulfill it. And you Guardians are the ones that are the driving force behind everything. I mean, if I had to be honest, I didn't even think people actually do shit like that and, you know, help give back like that. So I really appreciate it that, you know, you're helping me help others, so thank you, and it's all because of you. Anyways, Guardians, it's my time to go. I've had plenty of your time already. Thanks for hanging out, but as always, I will see you all on the next video next time.
It's